Africa doesn't need more aid. It doesn't need more money being pumped in through aid agencies that will, on a dollar basis, maybe 5 cents gets to the actual beneficiary. What she needs is trade. She needs trade, she needs skills, she needs export of opportunities so that she herself can better herself. Less aid, more trade. What are the things you've got to be aware of if you want to do business in the continent? First, get in through South Africa. It's the most advanced market, has the most advanced capital market system. The rule of law actually works. If you get into a dispute with somebody and the court issues an interdict, that interdict stands, it gets executed. That's how it works. Think about South Africa as a first world and a third world construct. That's how you want to think of it. If you're not in Nigeria, you are not in Africa. 186 million people in Nigeria. Look at the GDP per capita, just 2,100. Then look at the size of the middle class, 10%. It's phenomenal, the opportunity that sits vested in Nigeria. Exciting business, phenomenal opportunity. You watch and notice how business leaders trying to enter the African continent look at it perhaps like this. That it's a place where there is a lot of poverty, and that is true, but that is the whole story. And that's the untruth. My attempt here will be to show you both sides of the coin, not only the opportunity, but also where the opportunity meets with potential risk. Managing complexity ultimately is the ultimate management challenge. It's what we do. It's who we are as business leaders. So, this is also true, by the way, about the continent, that she comes from a prosperous history of hundreds of years of kings and gold and diamonds and copper mines. That she comes from a complex history of incredible wealth that is generational by its nature. This, too, is true. But what you hear when you read most media, specifically in Europe and the US, North America specifically, is that this is the picture of Africa. Conspicuous consumption led by the consumption that is debt-fueled, credit-fueled. It's about pop culture, Vusi culture, TV culture, MTV culture, fast cars, fast money. There is an element of truth there too. But if you notice, all I've described to you is a social complexion that reflects almost every other part of the world. And that's how you need to think about the continent. Just another part of the world. Explore it and understand it for its beauty, its true ingrained opportunity. So what's the popular story that everybody here knows? I see my good friend from Safaricom is in the room. But what's the popular story that everybody here knows? Everybody knows about the story of mobile subscribers, so it would not be an Africa presentation if I didn't talk about mobile. Boring, but let's do it. Sorry, Safaricom. So what do you need to know? In the continent, last year there were 420 million people who are unique users and subscribers of a telephone network. That'll grow, by the way, over the next 5 years, they're about at a 6.2% CAGR to just over 500 million people. Now, that's an interesting number, but here for me is where it really gets interesting, is when you look at SIM connections, that number is almost an order of 2 to 1. In other words, 731 SIM connections last year, million, that'll grow to 942 million SIM connections by 2020. This is the better truth. In my country, for instance, in South Africa, it's not uncommon to find one person with 2 cell phones, or even more common, a single person with a single cell phone and 2 to 3 SIM cards. Because each of those SIM cards perform a different task. There's one that's used for mobile money transfer, for instance, another that's used for personal reasons, another that's used for business. This is not uncommon. It's a part of understanding the complexity of doing business in this continent. Let's look at GDP contribution. This, for me, is an important number as a person who trained in classical finance and educated as a chartered financial analyst. I always want to understand the big picture. What are the big numbers? So this perhaps is the more important number. In 2016, the mobile sector contributed just over 110 billion. That's, by the way, is just about 7.7% of GDP for the continent. And that'll grow, again, by 2020 to 8.6% of GDP. By the way, let me just make the point that the global average of mobile industry sector contribution to GDP, global average, is just north of 21%. So purely on a like-for-like basis, you notice that even this sector is lagging the global average. Ergo, there is only one way, and that's north. It'll grow and it'll contribute more. So, here comes the proud African in me. I've got to tell you, by the way, I am Zulu. I said this to Ilav yesterday. It's important for me to tell you that I'm Zulu, because if you ask a Zulu person, who are they won't tell you what country they're from. They won't tell you what school they went to. They won't tell you their name. They will tell you first that they are Zulu. Why? Because we Zulus believe that there are two tribes in the world, Zulus and everybody else. We come from a great lineage of warriors. My family, for instance, Thembekwayo is a Zulu word that means the trusted ones. We come from a great lineage of warriors that were protectors and trusted. We conquered lands. We were true warriors, we were. First time the British Empire was ever defeated in the heyday of the British Empire outside Britain was when they came to face the Zulus in KwaZulu. Yeah. Marvel at my glory. So I would not be a true African if I didn't tell you about the proud history and heritage of my continent. What are some of the things that have come from Africa? Let's just go back and let's cast our eyes back a couple of thousand years. Did you know that the precursor to the system of mathematics in the world as we have it today was first discovered by the Ashango tribe in West Africa? I'll tell you a bit about that in a minute. Did you know the first medical procedure ever performed in the world was performed first by the Egyptians, just over 2,700 BC? Did you know, and of course you do, that some of the most phenomenal architecture still rests resident in the continent? Let me tell you a bit about the Ashango tribe, because they, for me, were fascinating. The Ashango tribe in West Africa found a specific species of baboon. And they found with a specific species of baboon that regardless of height, width, or weight, the distance between the forearm and the elbow of all baboons, male and female, was exactly the same. This was an important discovery because what they wanted to do was to measure instruments, you see, and they figured that if they could use this specific bone as a measuring instrument, they then had the ability to measure. It was the precursor to the system of mathematics as you have it today. So in simple English, what I'm saying is every single time today you find yourself using a number, you should thank Africa. Thank us. Just us. First medical procedure performed in Egypt. Best architecture in the world. I've had the privilege of going now 3 times to the pyramids in Egypt still. And they are, of course, a modern marvel of engineering and architecture that the world today is still trying to understand. So, you heard in the introduction, I, for my sins, I suppose, work in the venture capital space. People ask me, what is venture capital? The truth is, we talk about it like it's science. It's not. It's a bit of luck, a bit of confluence, and a bit of, excuse the language, bullshit baffles brains. So I run the fastest growing venture capital fund in sub-Saharan Africa. My goal is to have it as the largest venture capital fund in the continent. And the large part is important because if you understand the challenges Africa has, you will also understand that she needs large institutions to enable her to unlock the opportunities of those challenges. We're in 4 countries. We talk about the 4 horsemen in our firm. We're in South Africa, where I'm from. We're in Nigeria, which I love. We're in Ghana. And of course, we're in Kenya. Let's look at some of the macro data on these. South Africa, 56 million people, thereabout, GDP per capita, $5,200 GDP per capita. The size of the middle class in South Africa is just on 20%. This is important. If you want to understand Africa, my view, and I'm sure I'll get slated for this by my panel later, get in through South Africa. It's the most advanced market, has the most advanced capital market system. The rule of law actually works. If you get into a dispute with somebody and the court issues an interdict, that interdict stands. It gets executed. That's how it works. Contracts are upheld in South Africa. It has a large distribution network, large airport network, rail network, infrastructure network, mobile telephony network. Think about South Africa as a first world in a third world construct. That's how you want to think of it. But for me, the most fascinating thing you want to understand is 90% of South Africans have access to electricity. You'll find this nowhere else in the continent. Certainly not at that high a number. South Africa. Let's move west now, and let's go to the one I think is the real opportunity. So South Africa is a 5 to 10 year play. If you have a 20, 30 year play, you have to be in Nigeria. Let me put it to you simply. If you're not in Nigeria, you are not in Africa. 186 million people in Nigeria Look at the GDP per capita, just 2,100. Then look at the size of the middle class, 10%. It's phenomenal, the opportunity that sits vested in Nigeria. Access to electricity, 60%, but for those of you who don't know, Nigeria generates just about 16% the power capacity of South Africa, with a population 4 times that of South Africa. For those of you who have not traveled, and I travel there fairly often, every single day you'll experience at least 2 power shortages, 2 power cuts in Nigeria. So there is, for instance, an entrepreneur that we funded in Nigeria who has a computer mainframe board that will work even though the power short circuits. His market, only Nigeria. Exciting business, phenomenal opportunity. Let's look at Ghana. Why Ghana? Because I think the cedi, the currency, is very strong. It's at 4-1 to the rand. We always think about the rand, the South African currency, and the dollar. Right in the middle of it is the cedi currency, which is the Ghanaian currency. 28 million citizens there, 80% access to electricity, 20% the size of the middle class, and one of the fastest growing credit markets in the world. I mean, they really have a fast-growing credit market now. The capital market system is becoming increasingly more advanced. Leverage buyouts are being done more and more by companies, more transactions, and there's a massive growth in the lower to middle class sector on access to credit and credit facilities. Great country. But I would be lying if I did not say, this is my favorite. I fell in love, first with Kenya, and then her people, specifically the women. No. Love Kenya. I spend as much time as I can in Kenya. It is, for me, the heart and soul of Africa. It's warm. Her people are warm. The culture is warm, and everybody wants to see you succeed. 48 million people in Kenya, 60% access to electricity, and just over 85 FDI projects. And I highlight FDI projects on this because that's seen a steady increase. Just 4 years ago, that number was sitting on 42, and in 4 years, it's doubled. It really is a massive growth market, Kenya. I love Kenya. Let's look at some case studies of companies that have worked. What are the things you've got to be aware of if you want to do business in the continent? First, forget finding demand. You have to create demand. See, in the ordinary school of thought and doing business, particularly in more developed markets, what you do is you find demand and you service it. In Africa, it's different. You have to create demand. And here's a good example of this. This is Oriflame. I'm sure you know them. You heard about the case study yesterday. They entered first in East Africa, specifically in Kenya, to sell makeup. This was their poster. What's strange about that poster? The model doesn't look like she's from Kenya, and the pricing is in euros. They wondered why their products didn't go off the shelves. It took some time to understand, actually, that the market was not going to respond to this type of advertising, but there was actually a deeper, more insightful point. Oriflame entered the market in Kenya trying to sell makeup. They then realized what they needed to do was to educate the consumer on why you needed makeup in the first place. They had to create demand, not find it. This is the latest poster by Oriflame. This was 2013 poster. You notice the price is now in shillings. You notice that the model is now an actual Kenyan, and the messaging changes. They started running workshops in Nairobi and, of course, in Mombasa, where they were teaching women specifically between the ages of 21 and 36 about how to use makeup. They created demand. They didn't try and find demand. First point. Second point is product adaptation. Understand quite simply that just because it works here, the way it works here, it won't plug and play. No better an example is there than this, Java coffee. So many international coffee houses have tried with limited success to enter particularly the East African market. Java Coffee has been incredibly successful in entering the East African market and doing well in the East African market. In fact, this is the growth numbers in coffee consumption in specifically Kenya. Why is that important? Because what Java Coffee figured out was how to blend the textures, colors, as well as flavors that are indigenous to the people of Kenya, specifically the Kikuyu people, to the product of coffee. So rather than simply sell a coffee product with a specific European aroma, they found local aroma, local texture, local flavor. Product adaptation. And then the third, and this, in my view, perhaps is the most important. You have to make sure you've got strong distributor capabilities. This is absolutely critical. So H&M has done this now. They're in East Africa, of course, and they've created a center in Ethiopia. Because what they've figured out is that the cycle of producing goods, specifically in Asia, and then moving those goods from Asia into the East African market to sell, that they lose time and opportunity. And so they've set up a center in East Africa, in Ethiopia, that'll do two things. One, give them better distributor capabilities, get better goods in stock more often at a better price. And two, and this is the most important, try to localize the fashion language. Because for those of you who are not aware, Africans, like myself, are becoming increasingly African. So I want to wear something that reflects my nature, who I am, and where I come from. I don't just want to be a black version of James Bond. Although, admittedly, I think I pulled it off this morning. I think I did well. Very good, very good. This, for me, we pulled these numbers. This was the most fascinating statistic. So if you drive around in most parts of Africa, South Africa excluded, you'll find a lot of Japanese second-hand cars. So I said to my team, I said, could you guys find out for me how many Japanese cars are exported to the continent? Look at that exponential number. Just under 20,000 in 2000. And by the way, these were undeclared. The customs officials then get better at their jobs because they figure out there are all these cars driving around our roads. Nobody knows where they come from, who bought them, who sold them, how they got here, what price they were sold at, and there were no customs duties paid. Of course, it always takes the regulators some time, but they catch up 5 years later. And then we go from an undeclared situation to a declared situation. Notice 2013, 2014, and 2015, the phenomenal rise of Japanese cars exported to Africa. Why is this important? Well, who buys cars? The middle class. How do they finance them? Through credit. Why do they use them? They use them to take their children to school and take themselves to work. But most importantly, where do they use the car? On a tar road. So what this number reflects is a growth in infrastructure, growth in credit and capital markets, growth in middle class, in effect, a rising living standard. It ain't just a car. It's not noise. It's a signal. It's a signal. So, let's look at the consumer spending basket by these four countries. Where does the most money still get spent? Education, 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 education. When I was in high school, for instance, in my final year of school, my mother spent more on my education than she did on household goods. Africans believe in the value of education for their children, and they will invest in education for their children. I was sharing with Ilva yesterday, I'm the first person in my family to get a university degree, not because people in my family were particularly dim, but because the history of my country, black people, black Africans, were not allowed to go to school past year 6. It was against the law. And so when Mandela won the presidency, liberalized the markets, it enabled those of us who were outside the education system to get into a formal education system, and you're now seeing a rise in access and consumption of education. Let's look at this middle class. Let's understand it a bit better. Who's done well? Nestle's done phenomenally well. They had some challenges particularly in South Africa. They've done really well now in East Africa. They've localized the tone of some of their products. They've entered better markets, and they've enabled strong distributors to do well in that space. Nestle, done really good business. Look at the ABInve transaction, which was in effect ABInve buying SAB, South African breweries. I'd love to say South African breweries was started by Zulu. It wasn't. But we should have. We consumed it. We did. We consumed. We were the best consumers of their product. Why did ABInve buy SAB? Well, for two reasons. One, because they understand that the capability is sitting resident in the SAB management team, and I know that management team intimately. When I used to run my advisory business, SAB was one of my largest clients. I can tell you about board sessions, board meetings, conversations, strategies. Nobody understands how to operate a business in frontier and emerging markets better than the SAB management team. Nobody. People get to work every single day at 3 o'clock in the morning. At the breweries, they get to work at 3 o'clock in the morning. They load the stuff on the trucks. They put it on the trucks, and they make sure they get it out on the streets, into the shebeens and the taverns before the customer gets there at 7 o'clock in the morning. They are a phenomenal enterprise. They understand true frontier markets. ABInve did a valuation. My view, that business wasn't bought for its fixed assets. It was bought for the management team's ability to access frontier and emerging markets. That's what it was bought for. And then Let's quickly round up with this. Harvard Business Review did an interesting case study on how to understand doing business specifically in the continent of Africa. And they came up with 3 main points. And I think those 3 main points will help us sum up what has been the sum total of my thoughts here today with you. The first, do me a favor. Do all of us a favor. Less trade, less aid, more trade. A friend of mine living in Kenya made a joke. He said to me, if you are typically in Nairobi and you see somebody driving in say a Bentley Mulsanne, a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, BMW 7 Series, and they're being chauffeured, they do one of 3 jobs. They're either a government official, a CEO of a large company, or a CEO of an aid agency. Africa doesn't need more aid. It doesn't need more money being pumped in through aid agencies that will, on a dollar basis, maybe 5 cents gets to the actual beneficiary. What she needs is trade. She needs trade, she needs skills, she needs export of opportunities so that she herself can better herself. Less aid, more trade. The second, and I think for the audience here today, this is perhaps the most important. There is no denying that all of you from the various firms you come from have a global technical competence. But global technical competence without local market expertise amounts to 0. So you might bring the product in. You might know very well how to tinker the product and how to engineer it and how it functions and how it works. But the people who will help you succeed in those markets, find the right consumers and price correctly will almost always be local people. Global competence, local expertise. And then finally, take the long-term view. We're busy raising our second fund, so I'm doing some fundraising rounds, traveling around the world. And even when I meet with high net worth families and impact funds, this is the story. Give us the capital, then look away for 20 years. Why 20 years? Because like the young lady from Atsov, who runs the makeup business yesterday, that's what's required. It's required that you take a view that you're going to invest today and that you might break even in 10 years' time, but then only 10 years after that are you actually going to build a business, an instrument of value that will sustain itself. Take the long-term view. Way too much complexity, way too many changes, and way too much short-term thinking if you really want to succeed in the African market specifically. Those are my thoughts. Thank you very much.